have a fantastic panel that's going to come up here today and talk to you about how financial institutions are looking at the world of blockchain. We've got people from all different sectors, and I'm going to start introducing them, and then they're going to come up on stage. The first one is the moderator for this group. Huawei, huge global telecommunications company. You're like, what are they doing in blockchain? Well, they have a vice president of corporate strategy for banking, financial services, and IT, and he is the visionary within the group that figures out how they integrate into everything. He's got a tremendous background in technology, both from the banking side with Wells Fargo. He's worked with KPMG, I think as well, IBM, and now he is the group visionary for the Huawei group, and he is the moderator. Please welcome, I'm going to get him up on stage. Come on up, William, a.k.a. Bill Genovese. Here we go, all the way from the mainland. Thank you very much for joining us. All right.
Thanks very much.
We've got a great panel that's coming to join you. All right, have a seat. You're gonna be working hard. You're gonna need to be sitting down for this one. We got a great panel that's going to be joining him. From another side of the blockchain world, there's somebody who's looking at investments and, like, sometimes early stage with the world's premier accelerator, 500 startups. They're, of course, out of Silicon Valley. Bonnie Cheung is the head for Asia. Deep background both in healthcare and in blockchain and investment. Was in charge of corporate strategy for Zulig for a number of years, and before that, I believe KPMG, AT&T, and IBM, again, another alphabet soup, absolute genius, an accountant. She knows the numbers. Please welcome Bonnie Cheung from 500 Startups. Here she comes. Thank you very much for joining us, Bonnie. Also, now we've got somebody from the security side, hubsecurity.io. We've got the founder here. Eyal Moshe has done work like the really cool stuff, the intelligence work for government intelligence, not an oxymoron. He's done work with the military, but he's all about security. He's right here at home in Soho in Hong Kong because he founded the company Planet Soho as well, serial entrepreneur. Here he comes, Mr. Security himself, Eyal Moshe, all the way from Israel. Eyal, thanks for joining us. Shalom. There you go. All right, and the question is, he sits next to Bonnie. Okay, good choice. And so our next guest, he's got a big personality. He needs a sofa all to himself. He's got a big job because he is building the Hyperledger community across Asia within the Linux Foundation. I saw him speak at the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. He is like one of the nicest guys to deal with, and I know why he is a community builder for the Linux Foundation to bring people in. Please welcome their head of Asia, Julian Gordon. Thank you. All right, relax, kick back. All right, and Bill, the panel is yours. Take it away.
Very good, very good. Thanks, everybody, and very, very much happy and proud to be here. Thanks, Andrew and Julian, for the invitation. And let's get right into it. I've kind of categorized the questions a bit in terms of industry usage and application, because that's a critical factor in terms of adoption of blockchain. So we'll kind of start there, and then we'll kind of move more over towards the technology side of the house in terms of some of the questions. So the first one, let's start with Bonnie. I guess I'll open it up. What emerging use cases from an investment perspective, okay, are you seeing in applications do you see coming to the forefront for financial institutions? Where's the interest going? Where's the puck kind of going in terms of the ice? And are you seeing any that may have started out high on the hype cycle, okay, but that have kind of waned and people are moving in a different direction away from them?
I think just to start with, maybe backtrack a little bit. For those of you who may not be familiar with 500 Startups, what we do is extremely early seed investing. We started out in the US, 500 because we thought it would be aspirational to invest in 500 companies. But now we have a portfolio of about 2,000 companies. So too late to change the name. We'll stick with 500. Maybe the next goal is 500 companies every year. But in terms of revolutionary technology and use cases, I think one of the things to be very clear about is, and I think it was very funny, 3 months ago I remember going to a lot of industry events, and I really, honestly speaking, every single corporate executive I speak to, they tell me we have a blockchain project, which to me was kind of scratching my head at the time, because looking at a lot of the project teams in the US who are actually still building out a lot of the pieces of the blockchain, I started to wonder sort of, are we missing something when we looked at a lot of these young companies saying they're going to solve scalability, they're going to solve interoperability, they're going to solve privacy, which are still three things that we don't see coming onto the public chain side yet. So, but as I dive deeper, I think the one thing a lot of us are right now inundated with is, I know I am, is every day I turn on my news, it's about blockchain everywhere. Everybody has an announcement about, they have done a transaction on blockchain. But to help you, I think for me, I'm always staying on the simple side. It's for any industries, right? Look at what is the chain actually is revolutionary about. It doesn't solve anything. So I would say it really only is directed towards problems who you are bringing mutually non-trusting parties together to transact with each other. That is actually the type of perfect problem for a blockchain to solve. Where at the same time, I think please don't disregard a lot of the infrastructure you guys already have developed in the industries, because I come from an enterprise software world, and many of the infrastructures you've built over the years still work very well for many of the issues you may have. But I would say that, really regard it as just an additional tool that you should consider when it comes to, solving a problem. And at this point in time, I haven't seen any true revolution or any industry that is seriously disrupted by blockchain.
Okay. Thank you. What about you, Julian?
Well, as you said, in public blockchain, I think there is a long way to go, right? Potentially, because of the non-trusted party, proof of work, all those kind of things. But in the permission world, there is definitely a lot happening today. And whether it's revolutionary, whether it's disruptive, I don't know, but it's creating efficiencies, it's saving cost, it's reducing settlement time. So there are lots of blockchain applications that are live today, and there's a lot in POC. So I see a lot, especially, and the three areas would be within financial services. With financial services, supply chain, and anything within a supply chain that touches finance, so supply chain finance, account receivables, lots of projects around, letting people know that your invoice, you can see it out there in the real world, it can be trusted, and then you can obviously do, use that as an asset. We see it in medical records. So there is a lot happening out there. But I think in the permission world, it's a lot easier. All the parties are trusted, and putting wherever there's this shared system of record is of value. We see a lot of activity today. So, and we have a lot of to take a step back too, right? So I work for Hyperledger, and Hyperledger is part of the Linux Foundation, and we're a collaborative project. We have about 10 different. We're open source. We're part of the Linux Foundation, and we have about 10 different projects. I think probably the most famous is Hyperledger Fabric, which is used by hundreds of different organizations globally for proof of concepts and some things that are actually happening today.
Including Huawei, too.
Including Huawei, exactly. And Huawei's actually got one of the projects. They contributed something called Hyperledger Caliper, and we're a non-profit, and we're seeing a lot of activity. We're growing very, very fast. A quarter of our members are in China. We have 50 members in China. The Baidu's, Tencents, and lots of startups. So we see a lot of excitement, and we're seeing traction. Ultimately, has to have a business case, right? It has to either save money or sometimes a societal, benefit, and we're seeing a lot of those today. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, and back to the second half of my question there. So based on the consortium, the Hyperledger Foundation, out of all of the use cases or interests that was initially generated, okay, and hyped, which of those has really moved forward the most, okay, and gotten a lot of attention and project involvement versus those that may have died a little bit further?
So I think supply chain, and we just saw someone talking about containers, the whole supply chain from one country to another, which you have a lot of records, and no one has ever been able to digitize that because there's so many untrusted parties. But people are working together, like WeTrade, which is by HSBC, there's Batavia, there's Maersk, there's a whole bunch of, and lots of other companies working on that problem. It's quite complex. Some are choosing certain industries. So I see that as probably one of the strongest cases. And I said supply chain finance, I think, as well, is another area that I see. We have companies in China got a couple of $1 billion RMB chains today working in the real world. So we see a lot of activity there. Yeah.
Any that were originally hyped but have kind of, interest has died down, maybe in terms of, well, maybe blockchain's not the best technology for the use case or idea, or is,
Yeah, I think as Bonnie said,
Yeah.
make sure that it's just not hype,
Okay.
that it's something more. So if you can use a centralized database,
Yep.
and you don't need to expedite trust, use a centralized database.
Okay.
Don't
Very
use
good.
blockchain.
By the way, maybe it's worth mentioning our conversation from earlier about the Israeli Stock Exchange, where they are
Yeah.
putting a lot of trust into blockchain, and they're actually going to roll out in production probably one of the first futures and derivatives into blockchain, and they want to be the first to be doing it, formally. But it's definitely an interesting move.
So the whole capital markets, obviously stocks, exchanges, and ultimately it's the settlement component of that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
reducing T+1 to T+ close to 0.
Or even real time.
Or real time.
Yeah.
I think that in any exchange, I think that is, and the Australian Stock Exchange, I think, is working in similar ways.
Yeah.
We have DTC who are in the US who are working with blockchain. Yeah, there's so much
Yeah.
savings that can happen there, right?
Yeah, the thing is, it's the interesting part is that it's the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. It's a government, regulated entity that is investing a lot into. This is mainstream. So they're working together with the regulators to try to regulate the whole thing, and they chose this specific path to be the first implementation of many. But
And I agree with you too, because this is one area we do see a lot of changes very rapidly. Is it has already changed fundraising as a mechanism, and what we've observed is that in a very short period of the last 9 months, number one getting disrupted is VC industry. The way we are raising early capital, or the way we're seeing the best teams and the best company raising capital has changed dramatically. Number two is, I think this is actually quite relevant for Hong Kong, being a leader in financial services. It's that we see a lot more professionals coming in from what we call the fiat side to regulate the industry, meaning most of the companies now starting in that side are self-regulating. And if you look at some of the US projects now, I must say it's almost 100% of the last 5 projects I saw in the US, they're already registering at least a Reg D with SEC to make sure that nobody actually wants to run outside of the law, but they're just having a hard time finding the law to abide by.
self-regulation is very interesting. And it's the best implementation of blockchain in general. And I love the idea of self-regulation.
Well, I'm glad we're going down this path because that was kind of my next question. What role do you see with the regulators playing and shaping blockchain, but specifically, and this is really to Eyal first, in context to really 2 offsetting pieces of regulation, GDPR and PSD2. So do you see a lot of discussions on social media about, GDPR is going to blow up blockchain, but there's another point of view, well, it's a perfect fit for GDPR. And then you factor in PSD2. So what's your view on that?
So, regulation is very welcome in our business, and we're all we're trying to chase regulation. We're trying to embrace, and I'm seeing in this business, I'm actually going to regulation offices like every other week to and the funny thing is, they really want to regulate this industry. I'm sitting in government offices all around the world, but mostly in Israel because this is where my home base is, and the regulators are really into doing it. The entire conversation evolves around, okay, let's see how we can actually make this work. And I think the path to do it is really putting the security aspect of it out there in ways that the market can trust the entire flow. basically. And I think that the regulation in Europe is more advanced than anywhere else in the world. And it could be the right path for that to happen. And maybe for context, for the people out here, what we're building, I'm from Hub Security. We're a group of military hackers from Israel. And we've been in this industry in the shadows for more than a decade. My co-founders, 10 years, 13 years, 15 years in the trenches, literally in the trenches, building hardware for military use. And what we're doing is we've already built security solutions for blockchain, for digital assets in general, that is looking into military practices to be implemented in this space. And I think bringing this expertise into blockchain is what we hope will help regulators with this process of regulating the space.
Okay, great. Bonnie or Julian, any further points on the regulation aspects?
Yeah, so I think regulators are very interested. Obviously, fintech particularly is disrupting, and they want to become, they want their center to be a fintech center, and I think there are going to be many nodes. So some, like MAS is doing a lot of work around this. One of our members, Monetary Authority of Singapore, we worked with them on Project Ubin, or they worked with our technology on Project Ubin, a real-time gross settlement system. They work with the banks. So I think they're trying to choose, points where they think they need to get their financial institutions moving and supporting it. So I think they really, from an enterprise blockchain, I think they really are trying to get involved. But obviously there's lots of challenges, right? But a lot of opportunities. So I think they are moving.
Yeah, and I think to add to that is maybe some of you sitting in the audience, you may wonder, right? Every day you read in the newspapers, all you see is this regulator banning that, or this government not liking Bitcoin, but then you hear all of us standing here or sitting here telling you that, hey, regulators actually welcome all of this. And I think one of the ways to look at it is understanding where they're coming from. Because if you look at the market, in 2017, over 60% of the sort of ICO raised money projects, they're all focused on digital currency. And if you think of currency and government, this is one of the monetary policy is one of the two tool sets governments have in managing the country's financial well-being. So you can't really look at it and say, hey, I'm going to take away half of your tool sets. Of course, they're going to be concerned. But at the same time, I think if you look at the evolution of a lot of these early currency projects, they have realized that where they add the most benefit is actually in developing countries or in countries that there is instability. To be honest, I think for all of us, yes, it's great that blockchain solves a trustless issue, but at the same time, being human beings, having trust is not a bad thing. And I think ultimately, for us living in Hong Kong, most of us, I would say 99%, are happy to trust our monetary authority in managing, the Hong Kong dollar. So I think it's only in cases where you get into countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, where a digital currency can potentially act as a crisis currency. But I think this is where you see the hesitance of a lot of authorities to get involved in the beginning. But it's becoming clearer and clearer. If you read into a lot of the news, you would realize that it's not, they're happy to look at and understand how to regulate blockchain as a technology for many, many different uses in financial services. It's just that they are hesitant to guide blockchain in the purely currency side of the development.
Yeah, those are good points.
I'll maybe add to that point, maybe a less popular, well, maybe it is more popular here, but I think they're less hesitant in the most forwarding way, but they're all very active into embracing it. They're just not putting it out there on the news.
Yes, I can vouch for that, because one Korean project we speak to, they said it's actually in your realm of cybersecurity. And they said, yeah, the FBI actually wanted to work with them because they
Yeah.
would help them find out what are the wallet addresses that has a problem.
Maybe we can protect them. I don't know.
And currency is just one application
Yeah,
of,
that's
of
true.
blockchain application. Has so many wonderful other applications that are being implemented.
Yeah,
but
that's
but
true.
the focus is obviously on the coin. But that's just one application.
That's true.
Shifting gears a bit, we're getting closer to the end here, but I wanted to spend some time in terms of, what's your view in terms of next generation blockchain? Going down the road, 2020, 2025, okay, and what does it look and feel like, okay? And the reason I say feel like is because at least initially, Gartner did a study on the 3 dimensions of business value. I don't know if anybody's read that, okay, but it's really been focused on cost reduction from blockchain, revenue and new services coming from blockchain, as well as customer experience. Now, for the most part, I think everybody in the room and the panelists would somewhat agree that the focus has been on cost reduction. I mean, customer experience is not, so in terms of next generation, 2020 and 25, and convergence with other technologies, AI, IoT, do you see the business value paradigm changing and shifting so the customer can look and feel and interact with blockchain more, other than something that's kind of behind the scenes?
I think obviously the big is like, interbanking systems no one sees anyway, right? And there will be fundamental changes in some of these things, which will obviously feed through to more efficiencies and costs. But from a customer perspective, we're also already seeing it with provenance of goods, right? You know that and we have many, many chains which for rice, for many different products. In China, we have one of the largest e-commerce companies already on its site. You can, on its high-level products, you can click and see a hash code, and you can see where that provenance of that product comes. So I think from that perspective, from a customer, they should be able to trust what they can buy at their stores, hopefully at a better price, because it's a more efficient supply chain. So, but I don't know, really. I always think it's like 1994 on the web. We kind of knew that Amazon was going to occur, but we had no idea that Uber was going to happen. We can imagine what's going to happen in the future, but I think it's hopefully going to even be better than we think it's going to be.
Yeah, I actually think that the word blockchain will not be used anymore. It will be part of the infrastructure. It will be
Internet 3.0, or the value of the internet? Or
it's going to be part of our infrastructure for many things that we do, and we're not even going to be thinking about the drivers that is
the underlying technology.
Yeah, it's going to be less interesting and less relevant, and we're going to see more and more applications using it. We've discussed earlier about our plans for our security products, and one of our main things is to look into miniaturizing the whole concept into IoT. So we want to miniaturize it into a single chip where right now Amazon provides nearly full automation, and your fridge can order milk for you. The thing is, none of these appliances and the security around them have even been mapped. So, in a year or two, your fridge could be hacked probably very easily.
Yeah.
And, your cat might be ordering meat for himself. I don't know.
Milk.
Yeah.
Bonnie, are you seeing anything from the 500 startups perspectives of new company startups that are converging tech, AI, blockchain, and IoT, or any of those?
Well, I think what is clear is that we're back in the cycle where in the last 10 years, I think we see a lot of applications coming out in terms of disruption. And it's because we built the internet infrastructure for 20 years. Now we're back into building a lot of infrastructure. So I think IoT, blockchain, AR, AI, all in infrastructure building stage. And so from an early company perspective, we're seeing a lot of these teams where it's almost like back, I think, maybe 8 years ago, where you realize all your math PhDs are not going into science, but going into hedge funds. And I think the result you're going to see is when there's so many brain power coming together, and they don't have to worry about money, meaning they are all raising tens of millions of dollars within like 4 weeks. I think one of the statistics I saw was in March alone, in the private primary market of fundraising, blockchain-related projects raised close to $3 billion, even though secondary market is tanking. So you can understand when the brain powers are there, I think what we're going to expect to see is something very interesting coming out. But the one use case I'm intrigued, and we're looking very actively at projects who are doing it, is ID. And ID, I don't mean in a sense of today we think ID is your passport. ID is going to be multifaceted, and there'll be many petitions. And the permission and the giving of the permission is what blockchain is going to become very good at. So for example, ID is going to be not just my name, my age, but my genome, my purchasing behavior. These are all naturally me, what makes up your identity. And at the moment, it's all very scattered. And as mentioned earlier, right, why is it going to take some time? Because most people don't understand that. They say, oh, yeah, we're going to have data privacy, and people can all manage their own data. But what people don't understand is blockchain on the chain is not good at storing a large volume of data. There needs to be an infrastructure built around it. And we're seeing these different pieces right now being built by different teams. So I'm quite excited, when they come together and converge. And hopefully we have investments in all the pieces.
Very happy to hear that infrastructure matters and platforms matter. Very good. And on that, we're kind of out of time. I think we have some time for some questions, perhaps? No questions? Okay, well, you can certainly find any one of us. I'm here the rest of today into the early evening, as well as the panelists, hopefully, too. And I'll be here tomorrow, too. Okay, thank you.